Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
Welcome to Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sara Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright. And this week on the show we have
Brad West from Vellum.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Vellum. Golly molly. It's a lifesaver, isn't it?
Yeah. It's our favorite formatting software by a mile. So I love it. I got to talk to Brad a couple of weeks ago and we talked about Vellum and how you can use it for your ebook and your print book and kind of some special ways it's being used now, like for special editions and kind of what he sees on the horizon in the future. So for publishing and the industry. So it was really good. I enjoyed talking to him. And I think Vellum is like, of all the services we use, we talk about it the least because it just does such a good job. It's like it does its job and it's works and we're just happy with it. So nobody complains about it.
I mean,
so it's often overlooked, you know?
Right. It's just one of the best tools I have.
Yes.
And it's funny because when my first book came out, I didn't get it because, you know, it is a little pricey. And then my editor formatted it for me in Vellum. And then when the second book came out, I went ahead and got it because I just realized how complicated it was having someone else add things to the back of my book. And, you know, it's just made all the difference. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it's completely user-friendly because I did have a learning curve, but once you get it, it's so easy. It's so easy.
It's very user-friendly. Once you kind of get used to it, it's like, I mean, learn not that there's like, there's some little things that like, once you figure them out, you're like, oh, this is great. And it was one of those things that, I bought it. I did the same thing. I had my first book formatted by somebody else, the interior, and then I had to keep going back. Oh, I need this change, you know, and they were very nice and did it all in a very timely manner. But I just realized, oh, it is so much nicer to have the ability to do that myself and to do it quickly.
Right.
And I'm kind of a little bit of a control freak. So I kind of like my interior the way I like it, you know?
Me too.
So I'd say and when they came out with their print, I was so excited because, you know, that just makes that so much easier. I had quite a stressful time trying to format the print and I outsourced that because I didn't enjoy doing that. But now it's not, I can do it really quickly. So,
right.
Yeah. So love Vellum. And it is only for Mac. That's the downside for a lot of people.
That's the downside. Yeah.
Yeah. But there is a way to use it, I believe, in the cloud. So I didn't ask him about that because it's pretty well known now that it's just for Mac. But anyway, so that's what we've got coming up. And for me, I don't have a whole lot of news. I'm back from our trip. We're back home. You know, I've got that, like, it was a great trip, but I've kind of got that post vacation letdown.
Yeah. Where you need a vacation.
Yeah. I'm ready to go on your vacation. Yeah. I don't really want to open all the mail and clean the house. I'm not really into that, but we're doing it. But I did want to share, I'd done something different on this trip that I thought was fun. And it's, do you remember when we had Troy on a couple of episodes, like a while back, he talked about how he gives away books when he's out.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to do that. So I stopped because we drove from Houston to Colorado and we stopped along the way to see family and friends. And so every time we stopped and there was like an indie bookstore, I went in and I said, hey, this is a free copy of a 1920s country house mystery. If there's anyone here, like a bookseller that enjoys that, I'd love to give it to them or leave it for them. And, you know, some people were just not interested at all. Like I had one lady like say, sure, and turn around and throw it on the counter behind her. Like that's going to the trash. But most people got really excited. And it was interesting just to see their excitement and their, just like, oh, it's free. Oh, thank you. Like they don't, that's not normal. Most people come in and pitch, hey, will you carry my book? So it was different to actually have it. And I had a lot of good reactions. And then the other thing I did was I left it in little free libraries in different places, because sometimes there wasn't a bookstore, but I was like, well, I can go leave it in a little free library. And they have an app where you can search and see which ones are in the area where you are. So that made that a lot of fun. And
that is fun.
Kind of a little bit of promotion was done.
Yeah. So you weren't technically on vacation. You're still
is a writer ever really on vacation? We're always thinking about our books, or plotting a book, or revising a book in my head, or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Well,
so what about you?
We haven't had a good week. I posted in the group because they've been with us, been with me on this ride, but my sister goes on with Tuesday to go on to hospice care. It was clear that while the chemo was keeping her stable and the cancer stable, she was not going to improve, and she's lost her eyesight and really just is so we can't walk, and she just it's no quality of life. And so we 100%, as sad as it is, we 100% support her. And so she came home Wednesday on hospice, and actually, she's not taking the chemo anymore. So I think she feels a little bit better.
I would not be surprised.
But she does feel better. So we're getting some really great time with her. We've cried, we've laughed a lot, and but it's not what we wanted, but it's what we got, and we're going to do it like we do everything else together. I mean, someone said once that the McKinney family travels in packs, and we do. And
it is true, huh?
It's so true. And so today she's had a lot of friends over, and we've heard funny stories, and because I'm going to tell you right now, my sister has always done exactly what she wanted to do, and she has really been an inspiration to me as far as not worrying about what people think about you, especially in my writing, because I grew up in a pretty conservative home and conservative friends and stuff. And then when I started writing romance, sexy romance, I think initially I was like, oh, I don't know, but
how it would be received and everything.
Yeah. And I really have, I've always admired that about her, and I've tried to model some stuff around that. And, so it's been good. The funny thing, another funny story was that I was helping her put her socks on, and she was like, "Sissy," and I said, "What?" And she said, "Your hands are so strong. Like, they're massive. I feel sorry for Chris." So everything has been about my massive hands since then. So it's been pretty funny, but it's very sweet. I'll be devastated. I am devastated, but she's her life is ending the way she has lived it, with dignity and kindness and love for us, and she's made sure that we all know how much we love her, and so how much she loves us, and we've let her know how much we love her, and that's just all you can do at this point. And but I do, gosh, y'all have been so kind to me, and I just appreciate your sweet words and your messages and everything. I just can't tell you how much it means to me. So thank you. And that's enough about my sad life. Let's get on with Brad's interview. Because, if you don't use Vellum, you're going to want to hear this. If you do use Vellum, you're going to want to hear it, because there's some new things coming. So that's great.
All right. Well, here is Brad.
All
right. Today we are super excited to talk to Brad West. Hi, Brad. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you doing?
We're doing good.
Good.
So let me read your bio, and then we'll jump into the questions and start talking about Vellum.
All right. Okay.
All right. One of the creators of Vellum, Brad West, has been part of book and ebook design for over 10 years. Before Vellum, Brad spent 15 years at Pixar Animation Studios, where he worked on feature films and helped develop its next generation animation for software. So that is a cool background. I don't think we've ever had anybody on that has that background.
Well, we all find our ways here in different ways.
Yeah. Well, so tell us how you got started working with writers.
Well, in that bio, I mentioned that previously I was at Pixar. I was out there with my good friend Brad Andelman, who's the other half of Vellum, and we both worked there around 15 years, and decided, we want to do something different, something smaller, something that we could kind of control, and we just kind of went out looking for problems. Problems to help solve. And, there's a lot of them out there. But one thing that my wife kept nagging me about was she was like, "What's formatting?" And I'm like, what are you, what are you talking about? And she's not a writer, but she's a reader. And she was reading a ton of books from indie writers, and she would see them complain about formatting. So I've told this story a few times, and I've kind of like forgotten about the details. I brought this up to her recently, and she's like, "Well, the reason I asked that, right?" And I was like, "No, I can't remember." She's like, "Because I wanted book 3 to come out, and it was stuck in formatting." So
which is a problem.
Yeah. So that was kind of the motivation of how we identified that problem. And I brought it up with Brad, and we both looked at it, and it was just one of those things that the more we dug into it, just the more it was one of those exciting challenges of like, oh, this looks like it's something that's pretty hard for authors to do themselves. And yes. And we also looked at what was out there, and we saw that it's like amazing that authors can get their books out there, and ebooks like bring so much to the table, but we felt like there was a lot being lost in ebooks. And part of that is just like, I think a lot of people would just like, if they could get it to upload, they were done. Yes. But we wanted to say, okay, let's do more. Like, maybe print books aren't as selling as well as ebooks are, but there's a lot in there. So we wanted to bring some of that back and look at what makes print books work, and all of the things that we've come up with for how to make books readable. And those lessons have been around for hundreds of years, and so we took all of that and decided we wanted to bring that to ebooks and make it be easy to use. And so that's a problem that we just kept working on, and that's what brought us into Vellum. And it worked out well. We have some friends and family members who are writers, so they could help us out in terms of understanding the problem better.
Right.
But that's how we got into it. That was a long time ago.
And I think we've seen so many things come out of the reading and writing community that it is a need, and people think, oh, well, maybe we can make this better. Yeah. And I mean, I think those are the things personally I like to use, is because I know they know the background of, how all this works together. And personally, I was one of those people that I'm not a formatting geek, and I'm not good at code. So like those early days of self-publishing, I literally cried trying to get things to work, and I was like, why does this return? Why can I not solve this problem? It was like one or two little things, and Vellum just kind of takes all that stress away. So I'm a huge fan, and it's been neat to see how the company has expanded. Like you just started with ebooks, and then you expanded it to print, right?
Yeah. And that was interesting, because it was, 10 years ago, people were very excited about ebooks, and a lot of our reaction was, people were saying, "Oh, print is done. There, in 10 years there will be no print books," and a lot of it's like, okay, well, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
There's no need.
And so I don't know if we fully believed that, but that was the emphasis of Vellum 1.0 is ebooks. And when we started hearing requests for print, it was a bit of a surprise, but it was a pleasant surprise. And it's been interesting. That was 5 years ago that we released Vellum Press that could do both ebooks and print. And even then, I think the emphasis was, I want to do a paperback, but I just don't have time. And I know it's not going to sell well or sell anything like the numbers compared to ebooks. So it's really hard for me to justify all the time it takes to do a paperback, but I really want one, and understandable. I mean, I'm looking at this at you and your background, and I see a bunch of paper.
I have a lot of books in the background.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if in different circumstances, I would be in front of another bookshelf, just like we all like having books on our shelves. And so that's what motivated that, is we wanted to make it so that you could produce a paperback and not have to justify the extra time for that.
And I thought it was great too, because some genres, like I write mystery, and so mystery readers tend to like print, so they will read an ebook. But a lot of them actually prefer print, so that works out well for me. So it's really nice to have that option, and it's easy to do.
Right. Yeah. And it's been interesting to see that was 5 years ago that we did that, and how things have changed. And I think a lot of people, now that they're able to put those paperbacks out there, maybe their assumptions weren't true. They are actually getting some sales from print. It's hard to beat the margins on ebooks. But you can have some sales, and it's just rewarding to have. And so I, as we keep going, it's just interesting to see how print, is certainly not dead.
No, it's not. And I think maybe that happens when something's new. Everyone's so excited. It's like, this is going to be a new thing. We kind of don't take something seriously as, it's like, that's old. But really, like, what's old is always new again. It all comes around after a while. So I always like to ask people who work with the writing community, do you have any aspirations to write?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I do spend a lot of my day writing, but,
or write fiction, I guess I should say. It's not quite probably what you're asking about. I think though, there is something there, which is, that I can sympathize with, which is, just this overall need to get something out there. And I think that is true of everyone writing. It's, we say writing, which describes, the process of like transcribing, but that's not what people are talking about. People are talking about telling stories and getting those out. It's more than writing, it's publishing to get those out to readers. And I certainly feel that is, as someone who is publishing software and creating things, and also in terms of just writing, I haven't written fiction, but I do write a lot of information, and that is part of me, is just getting information out there. So I don't know, maybe when we decide to switch away from Vellum or something like that far in the future, maybe that will manifest in a different way. But I'm definitely that person, as I'm sure you feel, of you always need to be creating and getting stuff out there. Yes, and software is very creative, and y'all's like help pages and about pages, they're all very simple and easy to understand, and that's a skill, I think, to convey technical information in a way that gets it across easily. So I'm obviously lots of writing going on there.
we spend way too much time focusing on grammar of help pages, but it is something that we feel is important, is that's especially for you're reading in a different way. You're reading in a way that you need to get that information quickly and not be confused, and that's a very different skill than writing fiction, but it still is something
definitely needed in many cases. Well, so what do you wish that authors knew about your field, about formatting and digital software in general, maybe?
Well, I think, in general, I would say maybe you don't need to know about formatting. and I say that because I think, I think a lot of people, when they start, they want to take on everything and understand everything. And I totally understand why. But when you're starting, and everyone learns this eventually, I think, is identifying places where, hey, maybe I can take advantage of someone else's expertise. And certainly, I'm sure there are people out there who love dealing with the nitty gritty of formatting. But if you're not, that's okay. No, I don't think anyone has gotten into writing because they love formatting.
No, not that I know of.
So, and I think that's important to keep in mind. Like, what brought you here, and the thing that brought you here is the thing that you're most excited about. That's probably the thing that you're best at. And so when there are places like, for example, formatting, where you can put yourself in the hands of someone who thinks about this all day, or something thinks about this all day, take advantage of it. And that could be formatting software, or that could be cover design or editing, or any of the things that I think, anyone listening there's probably someone who's an expert in one of those fields, but rarely is someone an expert in all those fields. So, I think that's a thing that a lot of authors, when they start, they feel like they have to take that all on. And I think that's an important lesson to learn is, you don't have to, and you don't want to.
Yeah, it does. And there are a lot of things to learn. If you can take one or two things off your plate, then it can free up time to do things like, I could find somebody to format my books, but I probably I'm not going to find someone who will write the books exactly the same way I will.
Right, for sure.
So I might as well put my time into that. Yeah. Well, is there anything you wish you'd known about indie publishing or working with authors?
I will say, I mentioned that we knew a few writers before we started. And so I think we thought we had an idea of how indie publishing works. But I don't think we had any idea. We were probably a bit biased towards the process of traditional publishing, and maybe, we could see like how it works with indie or self-publishing, but the variety of strategies that are in play in indie publishing, I don't think we had any idea. And whether that be like, hey, I'm producing a new book every month, I think 10 years ago, I wouldn't see how that's possible. I still don't quite see how people get books
Personally,
out.
I don't see it either. For me, for sure.
But we know people that do it and don't seem to suffer as far as
do it very successfully. And
for sure.
And seems fairly easy for some people.
And not to say, if you're listening and think that you couldn't possibly do that, you're probably right. So just that variety of strategies of either publishing a ton, or putting everything out there as you can, or building up series, or building up different pen names. There's just so much out there, and that's been really interesting to see, and it's been interesting just for us to see how we can help with each of those different strategies. And that's just helped us understand better, in some ways, how much they want to use our software, how much time they want to spend using our software. And I think we now have a better idea of, like, the less time you're using our software, the better, because you've got so many things to do in general. And so that is something that we've really embraced since we've had a better understanding of it, is a lot of people who are using Vellum, they're not going to be using it all day, every day.
Right.
They're going to be using it when they're done with their book, and that might be 2 a.m. And they might want, and time is key. So we want to be able to have something that works reliably and quickly, and something that they can just pick up whenever that may be, and get that phase of their product done.
Yeah, and like not have to remember, oh, this is how I do this, or this is how I do that. Just like be able to put it in and have your formatting done pretty quickly.
And that's been a big change in understanding from, say, working at somewhere like Pixar, where you have people who are using your software all day, every day, and they're all experts in your software, and can point out every little thing. And that's an interesting way to work with customers. But this is very different. We do have some people who are formatters or assistants, and they are using Vellum every day, but most of our customers are not. And so keeping that in mind as we develop features or as we write help pages has been really helpful.
Yeah. You've already mentioned sort of an answer related to this question, but we always ask, what do you see authors doing that they do because they think they have to, but they aren't producing results? So like you talked about how we don't really need to know like all the technical details of how the software works. But is there anything else you can think of that, like, I don't know how involved you are with authors day to day, and like maybe the questions they have. I'm not sure.
It's interesting. I guess one way to answer it is authors who are on their 10th or 12th book, we don't hear from at all, and that's great.
Which is a good thing, right?
Yeah, for sure. And when we hear from them, it's when we're at a conference, and they stop by and say hi, and we have never heard them once in our support queue, and we're thrilled to meet them and talk to them. So who we do hear from are people who are just getting started mainly, and I think along with finding people, and I guess I meant people, but I meant services as well, like Vellum to take things off your plate, is, I guess, letting go in a way for that first book, and thinking of support. We see this every once in a while where we'll hear from someone and say March, and they're having one problem with their book, and we answer it. We assume, okay, great, they've got everything they need to publish.
Right.
And then we hear from them again in April, and it's something else that's, and as these questions go, they get like more and more specific until they're, asking about the hyphenation on page 235. And we're like, okay, it's good that you're paying this close attention, but what's going on here? And what we've learned from talking to other authors and assistants is, that book was ready in March, but they just weren't ready to let go.
Yeah, it's a big deal to push that publish
for
button.
Sure.
So so messing around with formatting may be a way to delay that.
And I'm sure, of course. And there's 100 other things. So I think what do people? It's everything that happens between when you could put push the publish button and when you actually do push the publish button. And sometimes it's like that's good to make sure you're ready and all that stuff. But sometimes you just have to take a deep breath and push it, and you can always push it again later.
Yeah, and you can always fix anything that's wrong, especially if it's formatting, because you can just go back and fix it and re-upload it. So that's the great thing about ebooks. It makes it very easy, and even print books. It's not too hard to change things.
Yeah, gone are the days when self-publishing meant you had to order 1,000 copies of your book to warehouse in your garage. So, that's the great thing about print on demand is you can revisit that too. And it means that someone may have a version of your book on their shelf with that typo, but every book has time. It's okay. That's not going to be the thing that destroys your career.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask too, like, do you see any common mistakes that authors do, like with their formatting, things that y'all have to deal with, or if you can't think of anything like that, do you, what cool, interesting things are people doing with Vellum?
I think, one thing that we do see, and I kind of touched on this before, is just how much they want to get into the details of formatting. Right. And I think sometimes that comes up in the world of ebooks, where this depends on not everyone has a solid understanding of like what it means to lay out an ebook. It's kind of a weird thing to get an understanding of, okay, you can control this, but you can't control this. So we can help you with making fun headings and stuff like that, but the body of the book is going to be up to the reader, and how it lays out on the page is going to be up to how big their screen is. And anyone who's read a lot of ebooks on a lot of different devices usually has an understanding of this. But if you're coming to this world and haven't had that experience, that can be a bit of a challenge to understand. And again, in the theme of letting go, sometimes it's like, well, that's just how you can't control exactly what's on this page in an ebook. And you can't, yes, I understand why you would like this image to be exactly here, but I'm sorry, it's not going to work. And, and it's a trade-off. That's how you get so many different ways to read your book. So I think that's something that if you haven't seen ebooks, people can be picky about that in ways they don't quite realize that. Well, you can't really change that
because you can change the size of the font, and that shifts everything, and the devices are different sizes.
And every once in a while we'll get an email from someone who says, I had exactly how I wanted it. And then I changed the font size and now it's all broken. I'm like, oh, what have you been doing to try and like...
How long have you been working on this?
And so, our goal is to have people be able to format their book, and this changes based on what you're formatting. But if you're formatting a fiction book and you've used Vellum a few times before, our goal is, less than an hour. People say 15 minutes for something. Not everyone's going to be that way, but that's to give people an idea. That's our goal. We don't want you spending weeks and weeks on your book. If you're doing that, either, maybe you're writing some piece of nonfiction that's just really involved, and we've seen books like that. But if it's just fiction and you're spending that much time formatting, then we're bummed out. We've failed.
Yeah. Well, what about cool things that you've seen people doing? Interesting types of formatting, or
Well, I think you emailed about one of these that you were working on is a special edition, and we've seen a few of those recently. That it's taking a book and re-releasing it, adding something to make it more exciting, and I think some things have come together to make this easier on the KDP side. There's access to hardcovers. We've been putting a lot of print specific things like background options and full bleed options, and we've been, a few years ago, those were pretty like obscure things to do, and we've been really pleasantly surprised how many people have been using those options to make something a little special. And again, this is, I feel we just talked about new authors, and this is exactly the kind of thing that you don't want to get bogged down with on a first release. But I think this is the exact opposite of, hey, it's been a while since you've released a book. You might have some special meaning to you, the author, or your readers. And, now after you've put a few books out there, now is the time when you can come back and add something special. And, I don't know if those are huge profit vehicles, but I think that's okay. I think it's a great way to celebrate just for an author to like say, oh, look at this cool thing, and have a really great looking thing on your shelf. And fans seem to love them. It's a great way to involve them. It's a great way to have if you go to signings.
Yeah.
And it's funny to think of that in contrast to what we said earlier in this conversation about people thinking print is dead, and yet this is the thing that people are really excited about, is just kind of doing all these things that really only work in print.
Yeah. So I'm doing a special edition for the first book in my most popular series, and so one thing I did was I used the full page bleed for the chapter facing pages. I put an image in so that it just makes it a little more special.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use a Kickstarter. So we'll find out if it's, worthwhile, or if it's just something that I do for my fans and say, here you go, so I'll let you know if it's, profitable
And
or not.
Kickstarter is another great thing that, I don't think as many authors made use of, say, 10 years ago. And it's certainly not a vehicle that would make as much sense for a brand new author.
Right.
But it's a great, I've seen that a lot too, for the special editions going through Kickstarter.
Yeah.
It's great all around, because you can connect better with those people who are interested in it. And so I think that's great. We've met a few authors who've been making them, and they're so excited to have them. I have a few of them on my bookshelf, and they're fun for us to see too, because we're just like, oh, I'm so glad you could use that, or these new features to make that.
Yeah. And the thing I like about it is if I need to make a change, I can do it pretty simply. Whereas if, I outsource, then, you got to contact the person and wait for them to make a change, get around. So that's one reason that I was like, let me see if I can do this in Vellum. And if I can, I'll just do that because it makes it easier.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that's great. Yeah, really, really liking that. So I think that's really cool. So we talked a little bit about how indie publishing has changed. Any other changes you've seen, like from now we're kind of swinging back around to print, but
I think what's interesting to me is what has changed and what hasn't changed. And ebook, going from ebook to print and back to print, or print to ebook and back to print, is one way. Audiobooks have kind of come around in the last years. So I think those are all cases, though, of different ways to get your story to your readers.
Right.
And certainly the change from the very early Kindles that were huge bricks and people like laughing at the idea of reading on their phones, to now I think the phone is probably a lot of people's. So those are things have changed, but I guess what hasn't changed, and as people in tech, we get this question of like, what's going to change about storytelling? And my answer is often storytelling is not going to change.
Right.
And so, people, when ebooks came around, a lot of people are like, oh, interactive stories are going to be more interactive. You can like click on, and, I think that comes from a lot of nostalgia about choose your own adventure books, which I understand. And yes, you could do that with an ebook. And I know there's some out there of interactive fiction, but really what is still the most common seller is just a straight up novel, a story. And I feel that novel is, maybe print will die someday, but I don't think the novel is going to die. No. And as someone who is writing, that is the most important part. That is the most important skill is that storytelling. And in the future, you can adapt to whatever new media may come, but storytelling is really, that's the heart of it.
Yeah. So as long as you've got your story, we can put it in whatever format is popular at the time. Yeah. Well, what's the best thing you've done to set yourself or to set Vellum up for success? We always ask everybody this question at the end, so you can answer it either way.
I think a lot of it is to just keep going.
Yeah.
And I think this is true for authors. You can, as well as software developers, you spend so much energy getting that book out there, and you're going to get a lot of excitement from your friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be really hard when reality strikes after that first. If you get that book out there, and that's probably not going to be your full-time job or income.
Probably not with one book, right?
Right. And so you really do have to keep going. And for an author, that usually means writing more books. For us, that meant just keep on developing Vellum. And you just got to keep going and stay true to what you believe you want to do, whether that's storytelling or for what we wanted Vellum to be. It takes a lot of endurance.
Yeah.
But you've just got to keep going, and a lot of things will come from that. Is you'll learn things, and there'll be some amount of luck of people finding you and liking your work, but you've got to keep going.
Yeah. The longer you stay in the game, the better chance of hitting those big goals that you may have had in the beginning.
Yeah. And I think it's just okay to not hit those. You're going to find success stories of the person who got a hit with their very first book. That's not the common case.
Yeah, I was gonna say those are rare.
Yeah, those are rare. And if it's not you, it doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means that everything didn't quite come together in the way that they did for someone else. You've got to keep going, and it's definitely hard for sure.
Yeah, but we've talked too on the podcast to people who have hit their success has been like a steady build, and they're happy because when they have a backlist, so if you hit with one book, then that's all you've got. But if you hit and you have 20 or 40 books out, then you're set. You're in a good position for people to go back and read your backlist. So there is something to be said for the slow, steady growth and just keeping at it. Yeah. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for talking to us about Vellum and kind of new ways we can use it. Where can people find out more about you and about Vellum?
You can find Vellum at vellum.pub.
Okay.
That's where you can go see how it works. If you have a Mac, you can download the software. We make it free to download the software. You can use it as much as you want. It's only when you want to actually publish a book that you actually charge. And we like that. Some people spend quite a lot of time before they're ready to publish, but that's okay. So we like having it free though, so people can just try it out. Don't even need to know your name or credit card information or anything. Try it out and see how it works for you. And hopefully we can be there, when you publish your first and then your third and fifth and 10th book. Yeah.
So that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we'll have the link and everything in the show notes, and those will be at wishidknownthenpodcast.com. So thanks for listening to everyone. And thanks to Alexa Larberg for editing and producing the podcast, and to Adriel Wiggins for doing the admin. See everybody next week. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.